so much. You can hear me, right? Yeah. Okay. I think I will start with language also and how important it is in the question of decolonizing the discussion and the art spaces. And Majid mentioned before the question, like, which words are we allowed to use? Which words are we not allowed to use? There's a lot of fight about language, especially when it comes to the Palestine movement and also in what happened in our experience. I will start with the word genocide and also settler colonialism and anti-colonial struggle. I think we have a very special responsibility also as artists and cultural workers who are based in Basel and in this area, as the first Basel Zionist Congress took actually place in Basel. Also, we'll share a little slideshow if that's working. Yeah. So yes, all right. So this happened in 1897, in the end of the 19th century, when the Jewish Zionist movement started to become more politically active. As an ideology, I think it existed long before. But what many people this face maybe people know and have seen. This is Theodor Herzl on the right side, standing in Basel. Behind you can see what is called the Mittlere Brücke. And on the left side, you can see his publication that was printed just shortly before the first Zionist Congress and is suggesting to find a national home for the Jewish people. And then very soon it was decided that this should be in Palestine. What many people maybe don't know is that this idea of colonizing Palestine actually started already in the end of the 18th century by Christian Zionists. And then in the beginning of the 19th century, different Christian Zionists actually took more political action, made petitions, and advertised for this plan of colonizing Palestine by making it a Jewish state. This is Lord Shaftesbury, a British Zionist, who wrote an article in 1839 where he also pointed out this interest of the so-called civilized world with a very clear colonial mindset. And I will read it out quickly. It would be indeed surprising if the wide diffusion of knowledge among all classes of the civilized world did not create a wider diffusion of interest for the history and localities of Palestine. He was actually one of the first people to use the slogan, "A land without a people for a people without a land," which was later adapted by Jewish Zionists. And also, he founded the Christian Zionist ideology on biblical terms. So I think that's just important for the discussion also to understand our roles, our different roles, and to see the historical context in which this colonial project took shape. There's another example. I just brought a few examples. There's many, many more of Christian Zionists that were pushing for the colonization of Palestine as an anti-Semitic project as well, because they wanted to kick out Jews from their own communities and countries, places. This is William Blackstone. He was very known in the US for a petition that he brought in front of the US government in 1891. And he was as well, presenting his colonial plans and also linking it already very openly and publicly with the imperial interest. Theodor Herzl, I introduced him at the beginning, is a known figure in the Jewish Zionist movement, the founder of the so-called founder, and this is an important figure that is maybe more unknown in the back. William Hechler, he was a Christian Zionist born in British no, in a colony in India and then also moved to Palestine. And he was a big supporter of Theodor Herzl, and he made a connection between Herzl and the German Kaiser and also the Ottoman like political leaders. So the Christian Zionist movement goes back really far. Like we have a lot to dismantle there, and it's of course still ongoing. Like we just saw the horrible plans of Trump, and he is a known, you know, supported by evangelicals and all these powers that have a lot of influence. And I think in numbers and also financial support are a very important and driving force for the colonization of Palestine. And even Netanyahu himself mentioned that Israel wouldn't exist without these partners and these alliances with right-wing, anti-Semitic, and anti-Palestinian ideology. Ilan Pappé is a scholar I can recommend as well on this topic. If you want to know more, maybe read this book, which just came out recently. And now I would pass the word also to Majed with looking at actually the Palestinian point of view and the Palestinian perspective, which will also very warmly recommend this book by Rashid Khalidi that talks about the broader colonial context. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Stella, for this introductions. I think it's important, as we all know, about the role of Basel, the role of Switzerland, not on the aspect of the as well the Zionist Congress, also the one of the main headquarters of Elbite system is there, the complicity of the UBS Bank, and now actually where the Congress, where the US, where the Zionist Congress is this, like was like last Zionist Congress, I forgot the name of the hall, but in the same hall we will have the Eurovision as well, context in May. Of course, a lot of money is Basel spending each some years to protect the kind of Zionist war criminals who's coming to Switzerland, while as well imprisoning and detaining Palestinian activist or journalist Ali Abu Na'meh when he arrived to Switzerland. I think this all correlate with the idea of neutrality as a naked hypocrisy that as well Switzerland is actually handling since very long time. I always remember this kind of, I always tell this joke about when I come to Switzerland, most of my people, they don't actually have an opinion, and they always will tell you like a position. I mean, they have an opinion, but they don't have a position about justice and human rights, and they will always tell you they understand the other. I understand the Palestinian, but I understand the other side. So it's about understanding, kind of always both sides, putting both sides in equal level. So as well as the Jewish National Fund and so on, like and many other as well spaces and pension and a Stiftung that runs throughout the country that we actually discovering, and pension fund that is actually as well, and family pension funds as well that is actually investing in the Swiss space, like Swiss landscape institutions. Uh, I think now we would actually we're not coming to speak about the Switzerland as a state. I think we're coming to speak about art and art spaces and what Visarate have been doing, in this, in kind of in the sense what has been happening. So we've been invited to Visarate. It was Stella, you were supposed to like I just wanna you were supposed to speak about that. You would speak about it or in
Uh,
part of the presentation?
yeah, I was thinking to maybe bring that up more in the discussion part and afterwards when people can also join. Um,
Okay.
Yeah.
But maybe I think imagine it's important that people would actually. I thought your presentation would actually include this because it would be nice if you can
Maybe
tell what
I can
happened
give
in
a very
general.
short, I can give a very short idea of
Yeah, yeah, I think so. This is what they
yeah.
are,
Um,
and then I can follow up as
I
well.
think, I mean, what is the main conflict that I see is that there was, yeah, things that I see on a structural level that happened that, I mean, it's not happening just in this case, and I don't want to single out Visata in this case because I think it's really affecting every one of us in each art space where we go. And it was also in the context of happening in the same time period when Leila Moon lost her art prize. It got revoked from the cultural department for her Palestine solidarity. So I think this is, it would be good to have to focus on these broader structures and why is it that we who are very active and speak out against the genocide and for Palestine, for free Palestine, for liberation, and for also bringing, centering the Palestinian voices, that we get exposed to kind of unpleasant attacks and also like for example there was a situation about from the river to the sea. It's been criticized and diminished and like I think people, like many people, are very influenced by the media and by the mainstream narratives, and they don't understand what actually is meant and what is the demands of the solidarity movement. And then there comes a lot of prejudice and racism into the game as well, which, as I said before, is the very structural layers. And I, as an artist, as myself, aimed to, yeah, the installation was the idea to have a safer space for people who are directly affected by the genocide and also by the violence in the West Bank to speak from their personal point of view and also about however they engage in through activism, through art, or through education with this topic, and to have really the space to speak freely without fear, without censorship, and without having it pre-controlled or something like that. Like I think that a lot of the issues we face is that many people are nervous about the topic and don't trust Palestinians to just speak for themselves, and there's this sense of control and censorship that is really omnipresent. And I think it, on my side, I always say like we need to discuss on these things because it also leads to fear and intimidation and people start self-censoring themselves. But it's really important that we use the right words and that we actually don't, we will never stop to speak for human rights and for the liberation of Palestine. So just to have spaces where we can have these discussions without having fear of being also put on any blacklist or stuff like that, which we know is happening. So it's not like, I mean, it's all not personal. It's very much political. Like, however you want to look at it, I think we need to understand that collectively. And then I think it's also important, and that's also why we decided to make a collectively written statement and also to organize this follow-up event, to just also signal that we're standing together and we're not. I mean, the example that Majid mentioned with the alternative art prize was very, very beautiful. I was there, and it really it's really beautiful to see how much we can move and do when we act together and not in isolation, which I also think is the inherent problem of the art structures that we have, because so much is about individual careers and connections and so on, and there is little thought on building together because everyone's just oftentimes working on their own. So I think that's also an attempt with this format to, just to connect with each other and discuss what we can do.
Super. Actually, thank you so much, Stella, for putting some conceptualizations to what happened actually to in Visarate. For me, the most I just want to follow here, just to continue the Visarati aspect, and then Catherine, maybe you can jump in, if possible. I think we have, uh, yeah. Can you give me insight of what happened for people who are not in Basel and less familiar with the situation? If there are other like me from other countries, we'll see. Uh, I will take this kind of question. Like people can write questions, and I think we can take it. We can take this after, and then Catherine as well from the Basel scenes. She can as well follow up on what happened in Basel and see what's going on. Actually, for me, the idea of policing a Palestinian throughout during the genocide, and trying to silence and trying to act as if they should behave, and even send some people of the board to actually ask questions which are Orientalist and multiple in the same tense, has been kind of very disturbing. And I'm just speaking about that was actually almost 1 year after the genocide. So, and even more than a year after the genocide. Having such behaviors has and also questioning ideas such as genocide. Shall we mention this word? The idea of actually not trying to collaborate with our organization, Alliance for Palestine, as well, trying to hide as if there are Palestinians far from Gaza, from Palestine. They are actually coming to speak in a space which, and also during for me, during like a festival called Regional 25, which is kind of striving for common access, but common access for not myself as well. If I am part, I'm not a curator, but I'm actually as I'm one of the invited speakers, and I have the right to speak about genocide, especially after ICC spoke that this is a genocide, and coming to this kind of like undercover censorship, of the some and trying to police our wording on this and trying to question Stella about our positions, and what we can speak about and what we can't speak about has been kind of very disturbing. And I thought this can be a good and important time uh, to actually decolonize the space. I felt that there is a need to actually make a discussions, and that's why I talked to. There has been just before there has been not only the genocide as well. There has been no mention. They don't want to mention colonialism. There was like they're trying to be as soft as possible, as understanding of the like how somebody can be an understanding of the Israeli war criminals, as much as possible, and it's just like, and to stay in this kind of as well. This is the Swiss kind of characteristic of neutralities, and also trying then that they turn the turning of this to be kind of a personal discussion, not collective, while we are kind of trying to drive this to be in collective manners, has been actually disturbing as well after. However, I will continue being in this space where we actually felt the kind of like the shock and the anger behind, as we said in the statement, behind the kind of the appropriate language that we choose, the way that they kind of try to whitewash and as well take down the event itself, which is written. It's the title, Voices from Palestine. So it is actually kind of for me was disturbing and disrupting in many level in that dimension. As well, like for me, Visarate as a regional Basel and also as a Swiss wide art space, who claim to be political, but but not on Palestine, or claim to be progressive, but not on Palestine, So it is like progressive, but not in Palestine, this acceptance, leftists, but Palestine. It feels to me that I'm dealing with an anti-Deutsche in German, you know. And if you know the concept of anti-Deutsche is that those people who are actually, I mean, they are not that anti-Deutsche, they anti-Deutsche, they will actually they will be leftist in Germany. That most of the left party in Germany are anti-Deutsche, and they are those who actually they will not go that far, but yani they still will actually to try to make sure a Palestinian behave, a Palestinian corrected, as well, make sure that they protect as well Israel, but also for them is they are kind of pro-imperialist, leftist, So when it comes to Palestine, it's always there is a line that is clearly must be policed, and it clearly must that we must affirm the wording. Of course, like this kind of art washing of genocide, this kind of art washing of topics like that is not any longer progressive, or leftist or right. It's a human rights, international law oriented, you know, in a space that should be democratic, should have a board which is actually elected by hundreds of people, you know, which who had the right actually to speak as well about their own opinions, but they kind of if there is no position on Palestine, then they should actually they cannot just make their own position as a board against everybody else who might not be and who might not actually have the same opinion, affirm the same opinion that Vizarate have. However, the roots of this have remind me of a very important campaign we have done in a place called Kaisma. It's the National Art Museum in Finland. And this Kaisma is called Kaisma Strike. I'll send you this is also, it's a place where it's a National Art Museum. It's the national, I wrote it to everyone, the National Art Museum of Finland, actually. It's in Helsinki. Art Museum. And I wanted to mention this too, just for all of us as art, as people who are artists or not, to kind of understand how it could happen. There is a guy called Boya Dobrovinovich, and this guy, he has been kind of one of the main, sadly, his father, he traveled from Auschwitz to Finland, and he started this kind of armed trade industry with Finland, between Finland and Israel and the IDF. And look, some years ago, he decided that, oh, I'm not any longer working with armed trade. I want to kind of whitewash and art wash my money, which I got from the weapons, and actually donate to the art museum, So the art museum put him as part of the board of the museum, the Art National Museum. There was a huge campaign against this guy, which I would actually as well put some work on that for everybody here. But what I want to say, there has been a strike there. But it's a decolonial strike that have with a lots of artists from different union, from the artist union, who all of them have pushed for one thing. We use Palestine as one of the aspects of that, because it's a Palestine can center multiple things, because Palestine is an intersectional topic. It actually bring many different ties together. So we use Palestine to actually establish a progressive ethical guideline for this place and allow those who actually be member, and for those who are close or curator who collaborate with the National Art Museum, to actually have an opinion about what is the value of this art space. Is this art? It doesn't have to be political. We shouldn't call it political, because art, if you don't want to see art as political, but at least you want to see it from a human rights perspective, you want to respect humans who are coming from a certain genocide areas, from a certain colonized area, indigenous people, So like we respect people class as well, If you're a different class, there are multiple respect that shows the multiple identity we carry, And we actually push for that. And now the Kaisman, we won this. We kicked Boya Dobrovinovich from the board. His organization has been actually shut down, and thousands of artists have actually signed to actually revisit the ethical guideline and put the ethical guideline for the museum, and that's a clear sign of collective power. So we came back to Vizarate, and we are now, I would just say, Kaizna, the National Art Museum carries, and I claim that carries one of the most progressive, like ethical human rights guideline, which has been done democratically among artists. And that's what we want to bring to a place like Vizarate. If they claim to be political, if they claim to actually speak for everyone, so they must speak for me as well as a Palestinians. In the genocide, everybody should take position about genocide, and everybody should take position about settler colonialism, and everybody should take position about apartheid. I don't need a liberal Amnesty human rights organization or Israeli human rights organization to come to an organization that is with artists that should be intelligent, smart, and tell them, hey, there's an apartheid Now there is a genocide. Before, when it was an apartheid, and they call it an apartheid, and before it was a colonial violence and settler annexation of the West Bank and a blockade of Gaza, it should be enough reasons actually to tell you that there is something wrong happening. That's more than wrong happening. It's crimes against humanity happening in 2008, 2009 massacre, 2014, 2012, 2021, 2022. There is a long list of like crimes against humanity that should be not enough for you to not keep saying, I'm neutral, I still understand the Israeli side, And I don't need genocide to come in at the moment to make art as well, not political, still claiming that I support human rights, but you didn't understand me. You know, it's not, you can tell me all the values in the world, in my opinion, but if you don't behave with your values, if you don't treat your values, I don't believe you. This is like even yani, Bill Hawks have told you can talk about your values, but values is an action. Solidarity is an action, So that is like, if you don't do this action, then you actually betray the values you're claiming. And I do think we're lucky as Palestinian and those who work with Palestine, they have to test their values. And now we came together to put this test loud and broad and bring another topic into Switzerland and to Swiss places that we can decolonize and bring a new a progressive values and progressive guideline that actually it managed to bring a process of decolonization to such place and actually make artists owners of this space, not only members that this place just like getting the money and getting the privilege because of all this membership as part of it. Palestine now at the center, and it must be continue to be sustainably, and that's at the center. And that is what we in this statement, when we in this webinar, with what we did with emailing them, confronting them, making Palestine at the center of every board meeting the last 3 months. So we shake them, we disrupt them, and some of them might be here in the attendees as well, and I don't mind. And this is the goal. We disrupt them, we shake them, we center Palestine, we allow them to learn and unlearn. And if they're willing, they can also be defensive and be like, no, we are not like this. It's up to them to actually humanize us or dehumanize us. But I don't want to, for me, when writing a statement, I told Sheila, I would not allow, not before, not with the genocide, not after, anybody, and should not be allowed, nobody is allowed to insult the Palestinian, humiliate the Palestinian struggle, and actually insult human rights, especially during the genocide. That's all. So this is, I will give the word to Catherine, so to follow up in the art, and then we can go forward.
Thank you. Now this will be hard to connect to your words. It was very strong what you said. And I guess it would be very interesting now to also discuss already, but I will go a few steps back again. And maybe that also helps some people who are not completely aware about the situation to get a bigger picture. So I'm an artist and an educator and also a director of an art space in Basel. And the reason why I'm here is actually that I was also one of the curators of the show where Stella was invited with her work. And I'm in a bit in between the chairs situation because I was part of the concept phase. I chose the work with the other curators. We decided upon to showcase the work in the exhibition, but then I was gone. I was at a residency outside of Europe, and I was just informed after basically the conflict happened that there was a conflict. So this is also the reason why I won't talk too much about the details because I wasn't there. I really, it's very hard for me to still understand. I talked to both parties several times. And what I felt is very important and I appreciate it a lot is your initiative right now, trying to bring this conflict on the structural level and try to understand which bigger mechanisms are working or are part of this special conflict. So maybe first again, why I chose or why we as curators chose the artwork. I believe that art and activism nowadays have a lot of mutual points, and I feel art as activism or activism as art should be part of our contemporary art scene. And I think they can be used as a very powerful tool to understand what is democracy, how can we showcase different perspectives, how can we learn, how like to open a space basically. And in your case specifically, I felt it is important to give also a platform to Palestinian voices because they are underrepresented in the public narrative. They are often criminalized. And your work gives space to these voices. You have an open discussion, and people are invited to listen, and then people are invited to ask questions. So there's a very, I feel like, eye-level encounter. And also, right now, thanks for your work, both of you, and thanks for everyone who was part and that you're willing to take on this huge challenge, especially in nowadays political sphere. I'm very saddened to hear that it obviously did not work out and that it caused really a huge conflict. And I was wondering myself, and also now reflecting for this talk upon which factors are how do you say, like well, oh God, are at stake, or what happened? Why did it happen? No, and the first thing is, as you said, I guess there is still huge blind spots for structural issues. And then I also remembered myself, okay, maybe in my early 20s when I started working with feminism, the first time I realized, okay, this is a structural issue, no? And I think with the Gaza conflict, people really have problems to understand the structural aspect behind. And in addition, it is obviously missing from our educational spaces. I'm personally, maybe this is also important information, I'm a German. I just came to Switzerland 6 years ago. So the German school system, but I'm pretty sure the Swiss one is equal. We talk a lot about the Holocaust. We talk a lot about anti-Semitism, and I have a lot of words and I have a lot of knowledge about all these aspects, but at the same time, I'm missing a lot of words and concepts about racism, for example. And this is something I voluntarily learned afterwards in university. So these are already worlds that are clashing in this conflict. I think you talked about the language earlier on, right? About words that are important to use because certain words convey certain worldviews and also certain judgment of situations. And I agree, I think the language is very, very important. I do also think that languages are even bigger. I mean, if you speak English and I speak German, we very quickly understand, okay, there's a problem in our communication. But if one person talks about the individual aspect of a conflict and the other person talks about the structural conflict, you're also talking with different languages and you're also not meeting. You can't find common ground. It's impossible to solve it. So I guess this moment of a conflict is also, it's confusing. It shows you, okay, there's something I don't understand. It can be a very great start to learn the other one's language, to learn the language of structuralism, for example, in this case. And I think, I agree with you. I think all art spaces, museums, etc., should do it because there is this conception of we are neutral. I'm not taking part in any, actively taking part in any discriminatory aspects. And I'm convinced, of course, this neutrality is helping the existing hegemony, the existing powers. So we should take this way and we should start to learn to coming closer to reality. However, this is very difficult. And I'm also realizing this as my work as a director. I realized it as an artist when it's about feminism. Sometimes you think you're just naming some very, very small things and you're already triggering huge, huge discussions and people feel really attacked and they close themselves off. And I want to share one example, which I feel is maybe similar to the one you shared in Finland. It's different, but still a very good approach. It's this project called Tandem Diversity from Helvetia, which is the, I think, biggest state foundation in Switzerland for visual arts. And they have this program where art spaces can apply and they will fund and pay experts, whom you can work with for 3 to 5 years. And you can slowly, from the structures of your space, reflect upon discriminatory, racist, etc. Mechanisms. So the idea is not to say, okay, now we're making another exhibition and we invite one artist who has, I don't know, a non-hegemonic view or perspective. No, it's like understanding who are we, who is the team, how are our structures to choose artists, etc. And they know, and this is what I think is amazing, that it takes time. So you want to start with something, and then you already have the first discussion with the board, and maybe that takes weeks, and you have certain conflicts. So you do really little steps, and you need people who are experts. You need people who come from the outside who talk with you, to reflect with you. You need to try prototypes. You need to experiment, and then slowly with the time you can implement certain things. I guess personally, that would be the right thing for Visate to do. And that would be the right thing for, as I said, for all spaces to do. We with Doc, we just started doing it, so I really don't know how the process will go. I'm also very curious. I guess we will find a lot of blockades as well. Specifically in this case, I wonder if I can add anything right now from my perspectives, because for sure the other speaker here tonight are the experts on this specific political conflict with Gaza, Palestine. I can more talk about the overall view from a curatorial artistic perspective. Yeah, one other structural thing I also thought about, besides this, besides the racism that is at play, besides this hyper focus on the Israel perspective, I think there's also a structural problem inside the curatorial field, which is missing of care, missing of time, missing of how do we deal with projects like yours? I think we kind of said, okay, let's invite it. They have everything figured out. We give you the space and you do you. And that was a very bad idea. And this is something where I also see, there was also missing care from my side. Like, I will never leave the country again and not be present during a curatorial process. Like, these things, it's also, we could have talked way more beforehand. I think a lot of things popped up one day, you feel you need to take a quick decision, you take a biased decision, and you're already in the middle of a conflict. And this, in addition, I think it's also important to reflect upon how can we create an exhibition, how can we create spaces that have enough resources and infrastructure to properly take care of the projects and the artists we invite. And maybe for here, I leave it and give the work back to you, and we see how we can connect later.
Thank you, Catherine, for your input. It's important, I think, question about what open and when the discussion, what should start and what should we learn, what should we unlearn. There is a lot in the mainstream and in the system and education needs to be decolonized, you know. However, now we go to Samir. If you can introduce yourself, and as well, it would be you have the stage. Yeah.
Thanks, Majid, and thank you, everyone. Thank you to the other panelists tonight, and thank you to all the attendees for a really interesting discussion so far. I look forward to the questions and the Q&A after this. So, my name is Samir. I'm a Palestinian artist and activist with the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, or BDS movement. I've been working on the cultural boycott of Israel personally for up to about a decade now. I work with a lot of networks of artists and artist organizers all over the world. I've worked on all kinds of different initiatives and campaigns that are calling for an end to complicity with Israel's regime of genocide and settler colonial apartheid. So what I can do is, in the time I have, just try to give a very quick overview of what the cultural boycott of Israel is, and some of the principles behind it, some of the strategy that it employs, and some of the impact it's had as well. And I'll try to fit that into the 10 or 15 minute window. But Majid, if I go over time, please let me know. So the Palestinian campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel, or excuse me, PACB for short, was initiated in 2004. So it's more than 20 years since this authoritative call from Palestinians that has now been endorsed by the absolute majority of Palestinian artists and arts organizations. More than 2 decades since that was issued. In that time, tens of thousands of individual artists have endorsed publicly the cultural boycott of Israel, and a growing number of arts organizations have done as well. There are efforts ongoing to count those arts organizations right now because in the last 16 months, since the onset of Israel's live-streamed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, we have seen a proliferation of these kind of initiatives. And so it's a bit of a challenge to actually count them up across many different languages and countries and regions. But it is many, many hundreds of arts organizations in just the last 16 months alone have publicly endorsed the cultural boycott of Israel. And this includes galleries and other visual art spaces. It includes theaters, music festivals, film festivals, record labels, publishers, and really every other type of cultural organization, arts institution that you can imagine. The cultural boycott of Israel strictly targets complicit institutions, not individuals, and it targets complicity rather than identity. So what does that mean in practice? It means that BDS, including the cultural boycott of Israel, its sole focus is on institutional culpability in Israel's regime. So what this means in practice is that Israel's cultural sector, including publishers, let's say. So just a few months ago, 7,000 writers, including Sally Rooney, Khaled Hosseini, and so many other prominent authors all around the world, came out with a letter boycotting complicit Israeli publishers for their role in whitewashing or justifying or advocating for genocide and apartheid and military occupation and ethnic cleansing. So Israeli publishers are implicated in Israel's oppression against Palestinians. So are Israeli film festivals, so are Israeli music venues and Israeli theaters, and so on. They are implicated in genocide and apartheid through various ways. As I say, in some cases, actually advocating for war crimes, advocating for crimes against humanity. So there's a venue in apartheid Tel Aviv that during Israel's massacres in 2014 printed up special T-shirts that said, "Fuck you, we're from Israel." And they had the club's logo and they drove down to near besieged Gaza and they handed them out to armed, uniformed Israeli occupation forces. And they put these on the Facebook page of this Tel Aviv club where sometimes international artists go to play, including Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead, who actually played there in May 2024 on the same night. So in the middle of Israel's live stream genocide, on the same night that the Rafah tent massacre that captured so much of the world's outrage, leading to that AI-generated image that was seen something like 80 million times on Instagram. That was the night that Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead was playing at Barbie at this club that has celebrated Israeli forces committing these massacres against the Palestinian people. This is what we mean when we talk about complicity. Also, the Israeli publisher, just to return to that subject, Modan, which is the biggest Israeli publisher, it has a lot of subsidiaries. They consistently publish Israeli war propaganda on behalf of the Ministry of Defense. So there are so many ways that Israeli cultural institutions are really implicated in advocating or justifying or simply whitewashing Israel's brutal violence against Palestinians. So by not recognizing the full Palestinian rights, from benefiting from apartheid and therefore perpetuating it, these Israeli cultural institutions are well deserving of being boycotted. And indeed, as I say, tens of thousands of artists and a growing number of arts institutions have publicly endorsed it. Beyond these public endorsements of cultural boycott, there is a massive silent boycott of Israel. It's much, much bigger, actually. It's much, much bigger. So you can think of many, many major A-list artists who have never, despite massive offers of millions of dollars, have never accepted to play in apartheid Tel Aviv, but have also never announced this. They've never said it. Sometimes the media leaks it. So, for example, in November 2023, Newsweek published that Taylor Swift had consistently rejected millions of dollars to perform in apartheid Tel Aviv. But Taylor Swift has also never said anything about it. So the silent boycott is absolutely huge when it comes to filmmakers or musicians or playwrights or writers. So many artists are involved in boycotting complicit Israeli institutions. So just a few more quick words on the principles behind cultural boycott. BDS, including the cultural boycott of Israel, is an anti-racist movement. It rejects on principle all forms of racism and discrimination. It's a non-violent movement. It rejects normalization, which very, very briefly is putting Palestinians and Arabs on a unethical equal footing, an unethical and equal inaccurate equal footing with Israelis on the other on a shared platform in order to give the false impression that there is some kind of parity, like there's some kind of equity between the two. So Palestinians consistently reject these kind of normalization projects that are quite popular in Europe, including Switzerland, actually, as a means of whitewashing the fact of oppression. So you have in this context an oppressor and the oppressed. So there is no parity. There's no equalness. And so pretending that there is in a joint project, let's say a film program of one Israeli film and one Palestinian film, and this is how a lot of European institutions like to erase the facts of our oppression. Strategy. How does the cultural boycott work in practice? What is the strategy? Well, the cultural boycott uses a similar strategy as laid out by the BDS movement itself, of which, of course, the cultural boycott is a key component. So the three operational principles of the BDS movement are gradualness, sustainability, and context sensitivity. So a few quick words on those. Gradualness is a process of incrementality, of steadily building support for our wins. It means we probably can't take on the biggest and most complicit Swiss cultural institution with just a small group of people and we win tomorrow. Probably not. But we can make a start, and we can start today. Sustainability means we need to work in ways that are sustainable. It means that when we win, and we do need to win, and I'll come back to that, our victories stick, basically. They are sustained victories. They are not reversed a week later. So it's not like we want to make a lot of noise and create a lot of virtual power on Instagram. We do want to make a lot of noise, but we don't want to simply rely on that and then have our victories, some institution cancels some event, let's say with a complicit Israeli dance company, let's say Bat Sheva, and then quietly the next day it reinstates them when no one's looking. We don't want that to happen. We want to actually persuade the venues or compel the organizers of these events to cancel them through building actual sustainable cultural power. And then finally, context sensitivity. It means what works in the German-speaking part of Switzerland might not work in Germany itself. It might not work in India. It might not work. We need to apply our tried and tested BDS principles in context-sensitive ways that make sense for those different contexts. A quick word on campaign selection criteria. These are the criteria that the BDS movement uses in order to decide which campaigns to go for. So very, very quickly, number one is the level of complicity. And I've touched on this very briefly. When an institution is more complicit, like some of those we're talking about tonight already, and people here have more detailed knowledge than me of the specific incidents that we're talking about. But when the level of complicity is higher, it's easier to motivate people to join the campaign. So if there's just something tangential, oh well, they did this, but they were connected to, it's more difficult. The more direct the level of complicity, like the shorter distance. If there's a short line between an institution and Israel's genocide and apartheid regime, then it's easier for us to convince people that this is something we should be dealing with. It also helps us to prioritize because there are so many things we could be doing. We need to prioritize somehow. And of course, the higher level of complicity is a higher priority, but we need to balance it with all the other factors that we're mentioning too. Number two, campaign selection criteria is newsworthiness or media appeal. Can we get this story covered in the media? Because again, we cannot just rely on social media. It's a useful tool, but we get trapped by the tech billionaires that are all complicit with Trump as eagerly as they can right now, we are trapped in these bubbles by them, and we cannot easily break out of them. The corporate media is extremely biased, but we need to use all of our skills and resources to kind of break through that wall of censorship and get our stories covered. Number three is the potential for cross-movement building. So it's really essential, especially now with the global rise of the far right and the urgent need for accountability for Israel's crime of crimes, this genocide in Gaza. We really need to hold Israel to account, because if we don't, then no one may be safe. And this has to be our message to institutions and individuals who are not yet persuaded for our calls for accountability that, okay, you don't see Palestinians as fully human, fine, but you must see some people as human, and everyone is at risk, actually. And we do this even as we demand the end of complicity, because we can ask politely, we can ask nicely, but at the end of the day, we are demanding it. Doing nothing is hurting Palestinians. Doing nothing is enabling the genocide and the extermination of our people. The Israeli Prime Minister is a wanted man. He's wanted by the International Criminal Court for several crimes, including the crime of extermination, because Palestinians have been exterminated in Gaza. So we are demanding an end to all cultural institutions' complicity in these crimes against our people. The fourth campaign selection criteria is winnability. I said I would come back to it. We need to actually win. So when we choose, are we going to go for this campaign targeting, making appeals or demanding an end to whatever it is that we're problematizing here, we need to assess, well, can we win this actually? And if we can't, if we simply cannot win, then we might not pick up a certain campaign. We might go a different way. We might look at something else, balancing it with all the other factors that I've already mentioned here. So I do have a lot more to say, but I'm going to try to wrap things up. So I think I'm approaching the end of the 15 minutes. In terms of some of the impact that we've had in the last 16 months in particular, and as I say, in more than 2 decades before that, but I'll focus just on things that occurred mainly in 2024. In the visual arts world, something like, well, I know actually it was more than 24,000 artists endorsed the boycott of the Israeli pavilion at the Venice Biennale, the world's biggest arts exhibition. So 24,000 artists called for that Israeli pavilion to be closed. And this is like an official representative of the Israeli state, in effect, this pavilion. It was partially closed. It was kind of a stunt on behalf of the Israeli artists in question. But a more convincing victory was that the Israeli pavilion at the 2025 Architecture Biennale was closed. It was cancelled. So we have been able to make strides. There have been other moves to problematize the sponsorship of Bloomberg Philanthropies, which is named after its founder, Michael Bloomberg. And this institution is complicit in funding building in Israel's illegal settlements and in other ways too. And it funds a lot of visual art spaces and some film festivals and so on, and exhibitions. And so there are growing calls to reject funding by Bloomberg Philanthropies. In music, the huge US music industry showcase festival, South by Southwest, which takes place in Austin in Texas every year, was partnered with the US military and US weapons manufacturers. And as a result of a campaign led by Austin for Palestine Coalition, more than 120 bands gave up a huge opportunity and boycotted South by Southwest, and we won. A few months later, as the campaigners were starting to prepare for calling for a boycott of South by Southwest this year, South by Southwest quietly announced that they were dropping the US military and US weapons manufacturers. So in this case, too, it's worth perhaps noting that there was no Israeli weapons manufacturer involved. There was no Israeli embassy involved. This was the US military. It was US weapons manufacturers. And so because of the blanket outrage of most of humanity at Israel's genocide, and as part of the BDS movement's strategy of gradually and sustainably raising the ceiling and upping the ante, as I say, in context-sensitive ways, we have successfully launched a campaign to boycott a US festival that is partnered with US entities. So because of their complicity. So raising the bar is part of what we do. Similarly, British music festivals owned by Live Nation, the major entertainment company, were partnered with Barclays Bank, which invests billions in arms companies arming Israel's genocide. And after hundreds of bands boycotted and protested and wrote letters, and more than 160 dropped out of the Great Escape in Brighton, England, which is kind of the British South by Southwest. Again, Live Nation cancelled its deal with Barclays Bank years early. It was a 5-year contract, and I think they cancelled the last 3 years of this contract with Barclays Bank. Again, showing how when artists and cultural workers collectively and strategically use their agency, we can make extraordinary things happen. We can force some of the world's biggest entertainment companies, including Disney. Right now, the new Captain America 4 film is about to come out in a couple of days. They've already hidden key details of that racist Israeli character's backstory, but yet they've insisted on reviving this kind of 45-year-old racist character for this new Captain America film. They're hiding some details of it in terms of not mentioning them in the film, but because it's the same character, the BDS movement is calling for boycotting that film, Disney Plus subscriptions, and Marvel merchandise. Also, perhaps worth mentioning right now, although there's so many examples I could give of the kind of impact that we've been having as a movement, maybe just worth mentioning very briefly that the BDS movement, along with Film Workers for Palestine, has called for boycotting the Berlinale Film Festival, which of course opens in Berlin tomorrow. And a number of filmmakers have publicly announced their withdrawal from that festival. But as many of us know, the silent boycott, as I've already mentioned, the silent boycott of Berlinale is massive. It's massive. You would not believe how many filmmakers refuse to submit to Berlinale, which is of course one of Europe's top 3 film festival, one of the world's top 5 film festivals, and it's one of the places you would love to have your film if you could, along with Toronto and Cannes and a few others. But so many filmmakers are refusing to go to Berlinale because the Berlinale is complicit with Israel. Last year, there were so many instances of anti-Palestinian racism, including the federal cultural minister, Claudia Roth, insisting that when she clapped in the Berlinale audience, she was clapping only for the Israeli filmmaker of an Israeli-Palestinian filmmaking duo. And the Berlinale said and did nothing about this. They also sided with the German government. Even the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that the calls from the Berlinale stage for ceasefire and for military embargo and an end to Israel's occupation and so on, this couldn't be allowed to stand. So all these German politicians, racist anti-Palestinian politicians who are partnered with Israel's genocide, because Germany, of course, is a partner, along with the US and the UK and some other Western colonial states, is a full partner in this genocide and apartheid regime. The Berlinale actually put out a statement saying, well, yeah, we understand the outrage. Actually, we get it. And this and some other instances has what has led so many filmmakers to boycott the Berlinale this year. And as it opens and continues for, I think, 10, 11 days after that, I think we will hopefully see more statements, maybe some more withdrawals and some more kind of actions around that campaign and some media coverage too. I will leave it there. There's so much I'd like to share with you, but in the interest of time, I will pause. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Thank you, Samir, for telling about the cultural boycott and our recent amazing great win and how our movement is growing. And there is a lot of jumping on our boat, more than ever. And yeah, it's I think this is our role. It's important for us to bring Switzerland on board at this moment. Many spaces are still not jumping on the board, and I think we don't need the struggle as well in Germany that we have with lots of censorship and anti-Palestinian repression, racism to actually disrupt the spaces. But I also think there are a lot of opportunities in Switzerland, especially since we don't have much of what Germany had of history and other things, despite the Swiss collaboration in Nazi time. But there is a lot we can do to actually push even for German-speaking countries, and a lot that Switzerland can actually be a model for. So it's that we can actually bring some decolonial work and some more victories to Palestinian in this time, and victories to all of us, so that we can call for collective liberation. I will stop the recording for now. And then I will put everybody, please write your question. I will bring everybody in so you can speak your question if you have, and then we go from there. Thank you very much.